Good evening and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another program in the series, Adirondacks for All, Identity and Environmental Justice in the North Country, jointly presented by the Adirondack Experience, the Adirondack Diversity Initiative, the Wild Center, and the Nature Conservancy. This series has worked to examine the history and present-day reality of the Adirondacks through an expansive lens of environmental justice. Tonight, our speakers will revisit a critical event in the region's history. On May 13, 1974, a group of traditionalist Mohawk families from Kahnawake and Akwesasne sought to reclaim some portion of their original homeland in the Adirondacks by occupying a former girls' camp at Moss Lake near Old Forge. After 3 years of negotiations with New York State officials, the Mohawk community accepted 600 acres of land to establish the community of Ganienkeh. My name is Eric Reardon. I'm the project director, and I would like to start this evening's program by acknowledging that the Adirondack Experience is situated on the Aboriginal territories of the Mohawk and Abenaki peoples. Indigenous people continue to live in this region and practice their teachings and lifeways. Tonight's program, titled Indigenous Homelands, Land Rights, and the Politics of Protest in the Adirondacks, features a conversation between Jeanne Shenandoah and Neil Patterson Jr. Jeanne Shenandoah belongs to the Eel clan within the Onondaga Nation and was a traditional home birth midwife and herbalist for 28 years. A mother and grandmother, she works at the Onondaga Nation Communications Office and is involved with the spiritual and political activities of her people and following the traditional ways. A member of the Haudenosaunee Environmental Task Force, she served as a representative of the Onondaga Nation in the Onondaga Lake environmental cleanup issue. Jeanne attended the Global Peace Initiative of Women Religious and Spiritual Leaders at the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, as a Haudenosaunee woman representing the spiritual tradition of Indigenous women. Jeanne received the Harriet Tubman Humanitarian Achievement Award in March of 2005. Neil Patterson Jr. was born into the White Bear Clan as a citizen of the Tuscarora Nation. He is the Associate Director of the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment at the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry. Neil also founded the Tuscarora Environmental Program in 1977 through the assistance of the Haudenosaunee Environmental Task Force. Throughout this evening's presentation, I would invite you to submit any questions you may have through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And at this point, I'd like to turn the program over to Neil Patterson Jr.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining this evening. My name is Neil Patterson Jr., and we're calling in today, actually, from the Adirondack Park, I suppose it's called. We're participating in a program for our Indigenous youth here in Newcomb, New York, the campus of ESF up here in the Adirondack Ecological Center and our Newcomb campus. And so we just finished a nice long canoe route on a very historic waterway, cutting through Rich Lake and Harris Lake that eventually connects to the Racket River system. And those of you who are avid canoers, of course, into the Fulton Chain. We're staying at a place that has a rich Indigenous history. And we're talking with our young folks about the future, about their future, and about subjects such as sovereignty, such as care for the earth, and subjects like land back. That's a term that has been recently popularized. And so when Eric brought up this notion of diversity and inclusion in the park, and through the help of the Adirondack Experience, right away, many of us thought of back in 1974, the year I was born. So I don't quite remember everything that happened that year, but I do know that in 1975, my Aunt Susan, my father had announced that his sister had had a baby. And she was born in the mountains of New York. And all he told us was that she was born at Moss Lake. My cousin Ganienkeh was born here in the Adirondack Mountains. And over the next several years, I sort of learned about what was going on and why my aunt was up here. And it was the same conversation that my parents had always had with me about our relationship to settlers, our relationship to New York. And what they told me when I was young, they would say, it's always about the land. It's always about the land, Neil. They want the land. And so, I sort of would think about that, and I thought, well, not really. I think they want our money, or they want us to pay taxes, or they want our water maybe, but land, not sure about. And so it was no coincidence, I think, that this event here in the Adirondacks called Moss Lake Occupation was a real representation of that struggle to reclaim our ancestral access and our ancestral caretaking of the places of our people. A few years later, I met Jeanne through our work with the Haudenosaunee Environmental Task Force. And she said, I remember Moss Lake. And I thought, oh my goodness, you were there? And she said, yeah, I remember your cousin Ganienkeh being born there. And over the next decade or more, over the next 20 years, I really enjoyed conversations with Jeanne about our history, the activism that happened at that time, and just a lot of gratitude towards leaders like Jeanne who have been working on land back since way before there was a term called land back, and continues to work diligently on behalf of her people and our people collectively to regain that access and tenure to our territory. I'm going to maybe ask Jeanne some questions, I think, eventually, but I wanted to turn it over to you, Jeanne, and let's go from there.
Ask questions or just talk?
Nope, you just go right ahead.
Okay, I don't know where to begin. We're talking about this Adirondack region, which I've had quite a few of our variety of experiences in this area. Yes, I was involved with the group that moved onto the territory in Moss Lake in order to reclaim some of the ancient traditional homeland. I don't actually agree with the term land back. I call it land return. I have spent many, many years of my life working on different issues in different areas in regaining possession of our homeland. In particular, interest of the group that went to Moss Lake, it initially was a group of Ganienkeh Mohawk people that were making the initial move. They had talked about it for a long and hard time, and people had gone out ahead to search out the place that they would go, because there was a plan forming for quite a while that this movement would take place. So when they decided on a place and a time and made many preparations to go there, there was a good sized group of people. And what happened is I am from Onondaga Nation, which is not very far from Moss Lake, like, excuse me, I think it's about an hour and a half or 2 hour drive. I don't even remember. I don't even think about it anymore. I mean, we would just get in a car and go back and forth. But so this group came to my home at Onondaga Nation. The people gathered quietly and slowly the day before and the night before, and prepared, and very early that morning made the move over to the area they chose to reclaim. And it was a very beautiful place, and it was very somewhat easy to move into because there were cabins present there, and a large dining hall, central house, because it had been a girls' camp of some sort in the past, but had not been used. So, so these people moved there, leaving the place that they had been living due to many, many issues of injustice and racism that had been historically pressed upon them through generations. And they had this thought of returning to an ancestral area where the people originally had been before they had been chased out or squeezed out through illegal agreements and land takings and all kinds of violent things that had happened to move people out of their original area. So these people moved there, and I moved there with them, although I did not live there constantly with them because I was part of a support crew, and we ran back and forth with supplies, and we did a lot of things to gain support so that people in the area would understand what was behind this movement, because there are so many times that people never even realize that this is somebody's homeland. These people had used to live here at one time and they wanted to come back home. And then people need to hear about all the things that had happened to remove them from their home into another area. So that was a lot of work to be done, to be generating support and educating the general public in different areas, and hoping to get the news media interested. And it was very interesting to be with these people, to live there in a communal way together, like a big, huge family. People had different cabins, but they ate together and raised all the children, did everything communally, and had meetings to agree on different situations and movements they needed to do. But I should also tell you that this movement is one of many, and it generated a lot of interest clear across the Turtle Island, the country. People were coming in all the time from far areas. They had heard of this. They wanted to be part of it. They wanted to be supportive. People came and moved in and lived there and formed friendship. To this day, I have some very good friends of people that I met that came to be supportive to this movement. It took a lot of fortitude for the people to exist there, because it was not a place that was good for agriculture, of which they had intended. They attempted some agriculture there, and it was not the place for it. And nor were there many people working gainful employment, because it's more important to be present on the land, to hold the land down, the possession. And so there was a few hard times there, but fortunately there were many people that did understand what was happening and what people were doing, so that we were able to get a lot of supplies and a lot of support, and actually had worldwide media attention after a while. And that actually generated a lot of support and people coming from other countries even to take part, to be there, to be solid together. And one of the main intentions of these people was to live and to follow our traditional cultural ways, which had been quite difficult in the community that they came from. They had been overrun by Christianity to a great extent that disturbed their way of life and things that they believed in. So those are part of the first things that happened, and the movement went on to many, many other places and generated a lot of interest and support. And then they eventually did move up to a place near Plattsburgh. And there they moved and established a community there that is doing very well. There are people that live there constantly and doing a lot of farming, agriculture. I understand they're doing different types of permaculture and natural medicines. I haven't been there for a long time myself, but they're doing very well where they are now.
Great. That's great intro into the into Ganienkeh and Moss Lake. What was life there like a little bit? I mean, what was it like staying there during that occupation?
Oh, it was pretty peaceful and calm, and like it was an intentional community. So by being an intentional community, majority of the people that lived there were of the same mind, and they went there as a group, as a community, because they all believed the same things that should be happening. So I can't say it was entirely I don't know, it was just for the most part pretty peaceful and well organized, until along came some other people that were non-native people that came through the area and started some situations. And one of them was very unfortunate. They were shooting a gun into the community. So in retaliation, a little girl was hurt, but that was caused by external actions of violence towards the people. Other than that, life was for the most part, I would say, mostly happy. I really enjoyed being there, and it was peaceful, and people were laughing and smiling. And don't forget that people had been talking about this for a long time before this movement actually happened. It had been in their mind to do this, and lots and lots of words were said about what was the reason for doing this, and what do we hope to change by going to find another place, a new place, and make changes in our social life to follow the ways, the teachings of our traditional culture.
So there was a lot leading up to this. Can you think of some other similar situations that the Confederacy or Haudenosaunee people have been in? Maybe before or even after?
Yeah, there have been off and on through a period of times, different types of movements. I know there was one previous to that, but I was not involved. I was much younger at the time, but knew some of the people that were involved, and that was further down. I can't think of the name of the place.
Fort Hunter or something?
Yeah, I think it was Fort Hunter was the area that they had attempted to move into, but like I said, I was younger and I didn't take part in that, so I don't exactly know what happened. And I think that occupation there was kind of short-lived. And a number of those people came over to our community at Onondaga afterwards. And I think that was part of when I first started hearing more of the seed in my mind about this, although I had always heard of it in the community that I grew up in and in the family I was part of. They always spoke of different things that in these days they call it historical trauma, but at that time it didn't have that label yet. They just talked about land that we were not on anymore. And things that had happened to us in the areas, talked about the areas around where we lived that we no longer were occupying. But through the old ways, we still believed it to be ours. And that's partly why I don't say land back. I say land return, because we have always, throughout the generations and throughout my life, through the teachings that I have always heard by the older people, is that is our homeland. It never stopped to be our homeland. It still is our home. Like I'm here right now and I'm on a homeland, or I'm in somebody else's home territory. We never thought any longer that it was not ours or we didn't belong there. That came through other people saying that we don't own that land anymore. But all those land takings that reduced the area that we live in were all illegal. They're all illegal, or some kind of unjust kind of a trickery or something to gain possession of areas. Because even if we didn't exactly live right on that spot, we didn't have a house exactly right there, that doesn't mean that we didn't use it, because many of these places had names. People had names for these areas because they did hunting there. Many people harvested medicines and food. And I just saw my best friend.
Yeah, please, Neil, would you like to introduce Mr. Porter? We have a special guest that's joining us here.
No problem. Tego, Sago Guanyokwas.
Shego, Shego.
Hey, Tota.
Shego.
We were just beginning the conversation. If you'd like to share a little bit about your experience with Moss Lake, we'd love to hear you.
With Adirondacks?
Yeah.
You're talking? Yeah. Well, all I know is that the name Adirondack is, we call it Ladiluntak. Ladiluntak means a porcupine in English. And then there used to be Ojibwe people lived over there in the Adirondacks before we got here. And those Ojibways used to season their food when they cooked with some of the bark from the trees, the inner barks of the trees. Some of them they would season it. So because we seen them doing that long ago, we called them porcupine or ladilundaks. Then when the European came, they couldn't say ladilundak, so they said Adirondack. But the proper way to say the mountains there is ladilundaks, the place of the porcupine or the Ojibwe. Yeah. And then I know that as a kid, when I was a young boy, uh, nobody hardly had cars in our land where we lived, but we had a team of horses and wagons. And that's how we used to go to town, on a team of horses and a wagon. And I know that in late summer and early fall, our grandmother and my mother and different ones, we'd all get on that wagon. They would make biscuits and salt pork sandwich with a nice fresh onions on it. And that's our picnic lunch to go to pick medicine in the foothills of the Adirondacks. And we'd go all day long with the horse and everything. And I remember them picking turtle they call it turtle stalks. I think that's what they call it. Turtle socks. I think I know my language what they call it though. And also they pick golden thread and sweet flag and all kind of medicine up there. Enough for the winter. But not only did we pick for ourselves, but they would pick by the branch sacks full, and it would be being picked for the Six Nations Grand River because they used to trade that medicine for the year, and Mohawks would go pick it in the mountains for them. And I don't know what we traded, what they gave us, but we used to pick it by big branch sacks full, and because their reservation is big, so they would get ready for the winter. Yeah. And then, but I do know too that the Adirondacks mountains and lakes were also big hunting grounds for the Mohawk people and all the other nations of the Haudenosaunee, because there was a treaty made called the dish of one spoon or one bowl, and so anybody could hunt there if they wanted to, if they were hungry, they could hunt there. That's what that treaty said. No more dispute or argument. If anybody needs to hunt, they could hunt. That's why they made that treaty. And then I know also that there was trails that go way to the south from there, too. But Akwesasne was only a hunting camp. It wasn't where we used to really live. But there were temporary hunting village there. Our main principal village was next to Amsterdam, between Albany and Utica, all through that valley. That's where our principal villages were. So the Adirondacks and the St. Lawrence, all the way up to Ottawa, were just hunting camps for us. It wasn't the principal land. But when the European came, we had a lot of trouble. So they went north to try to get away from the trouble. So that's why they went to Akwesasne. That's what I know. And then where I live right now is in Fonda, New York, or Amsterdam, New York. It's also the foothills of the Adirondacks. But where the Akwesasne is the foothills on the north. But Ganienkeh, where I live now, is on the south, the foothills of the south. So we're still connected through that. And I know also that way back, I forgot the year, the Kahnawake and Mohawk wants to regain land in the Adirondacks. And so they tried to do it in our House, our nation, all the Six Nations helped them to try to get that land. And they had a big skirmish over it, almost a big war over it too. But eventually they moved from Eagle Bay, which is in the Adirondacks, and they made an agreement, I guess, with the governor, Como, I guess, at this time. And they moved up to uh, next to Plattsburgh on the state lands over there. So they were asked if they would move there because the people in Eagle Bay got too mad. There was too much bad feelings there. So the state offered them to go up there. They won't bother them, I guess. So I don't know what the agreement is over there, if there is agreement, but they're there and the state don't bother them over there. And they're still there. They've been there a long time. And they're pretty self-sufficient over there. They have big gardens and all that. So that's all I know about them. But then in 1993, myself and other families left Akwesasne Reservation, and we went back to the homeland in the Mohawk Valley, and in order to avoid problem, we had to raise money, and we had to buy land where we live. And the land that we have now, called Kahnawake, is about 420 acres of land. And we're under a 501c because we do Mohawk language programs in the summer, as well as cultural traditional teachings there. And it's open to the public and to other Iroquois people. And it's been busy ever since '93. But because of the COVID, we had to close everything down, and I'm not sure when we're going to resume. So we've been resuming, but it's been on a Zoom, not in person. Yeah, but so um, uh, it's right. The whole Adirondack Mountain is Iroquois land. It's our hunting grounds, and we do depend on it to get medicine, and sometimes to go hunting there. Yeah, that's what I know.
Nyawa,
Yeah.
Tom, and that's such a great point to remember is that sometimes settlers think about, well, who were the specific group of people who lived right here? And we always have ourselves have to explain that many different people have a relationship with this place. So reservations as far away as Brantford, Ontario, perhaps even out in Oneida territory, they're still depending on the medicine from the Ladulonda. And I also just wanted to mention that you're hearing from Sakokwaniokwas, or his English name, Tom Porter, and he's a spiritual leader in our confederacy. And with Jeannie and Tom, you're really meeting two people today who have been a major part of getting land back, returning land to our communities and people. They have worked diligently and hard their whole lives to see that our future generations can continue to have a relationship with places like the Adirondacks. And I'll just mention, in addition to Ganajohalege, which Tom has mentioned as another example of returning land, just recently, the state of New York announced that they were willing and able to return over 1,000 acres of land to the Onondaga Nation, just south of the reservation. And Jeannie has played a major part in that. So I wanted to acknowledge both of your work in Senyawa and recognize that.
You know, one thing I forgot to mention to you, I know that there used to be a treaty called a gunshot treaty. I don't think I ever seen a copy of it or anything, but I heard older people talk about it, and I never seen the actual treaty. But in this treaty, the older people claim that even if the European lives in our land or took over our land and made farms or whatever, that in this gunshot treaty, that if there's a hickory tree grows there, or a black ash tree, or medicine grows there, or berries, blackberries or blueberries, that those were what our people used as sustenance. That's what they used to live to nourish themselves. And so in that treaty it says, so wherever this hickory tree or basswood tree, black ash tree, or anything that we used in our day-to-day life before, if it's on their land, they can't. They're not supposed to bother or interfere with us when we go pick medicine or when we go pick blackberries or anything. And when I was a kid, all the non-native people that had farms that where the blackberries grew and blueberries grew wildly, they never interfered with us because they knew that treaty existed. But then later on, years passed on by, and those old European people, I mean, not European, they're American, but they're from Europe, they began to die off. And so they left the land to their kids. But a lot of their kids didn't want to stay there and farm. So they went to Chicago and Los Angeles, and everywhere. And so people from New York City, rich people from New York City and other places, came there and bought the land from them because their kids didn't want to farm it. And so when that happened, then later on we went to pick berries and blackberries or whatever, and those new European people or American people from New York City or wherever they are that bought the land from those old American people, they put signs on their land, no trespassing. So they don't let the Mohawks or nobody go there because they said no trespassing. But there was still a few left that still knew that, and they never gave us trouble ever. We go right in their pasture, pick blueberries, blackberries, and they always knew the Mohawks come at a certain time of the year to go picking in the foothills of the Adirondacks. But that was they call it the gunshot treaty. I don't know if that's the real name, but that's what they said. It was called gunshot treaty.
Thank you for that. And as Tom has mentioned, the one dish, one spoon, there are whole canons of law that we have between ourselves and also with settlers, with the Americans. Yeah, I'm so grateful you mentioned that, because these are very old ideas.
And you know, some of the things the old people told us was that periodically, it's supposed to be, I believe, every time the government or the president changes government, I mean changes president. I think it's every 4 years, right? That at least every 4 years, when there's a new government, a new president, they're supposed to meet with our Iroquois Confederacy leaders to polish the chain, the covenant chain. And what that means is that all the agreements that were made between the Americans and the Iroquois were to be polished, means they're supposed to renew or discuss it so that it's never violated. But I think that must have happened only once or twice in the early history, and then they never did it anymore. They never invite us anymore. But by our law, by the agreement, it's supposed to be in a covenant chain. They're supposed to polish that because they said silver tarnishes from the weather. So if when it tarnishes, you have to polish it so it'll shine bright, and so that our friendship and brotherhood that made the agreement made that, so we will have a brotherhood and a good relation. We have to talk about it. Anything wrong, we fix it right away, so that always will be strong friendship. Yeah.
You mind, Neil, if I jump in with a quick question related to what Tom just said? And this is for both Jeannie and Tom. And I'm really interested in hearing what you're describing, Tom, which is a neglect of that relationship from Euro-American peoples over the time. And I'm wondering if that neglect and fraudulent treaties, broken treaties, stolen land, I wonder how both of you think about this event of the occupation of Moss Lake, and what do you think was the real strength of that protest movement? What was how was it that this community and these people were able to achieve something tangible, which was the return of that land and the founding of Ganienkeh? What do you think made that sort of a successful protest movement?
Well, it almost wasn't successful. Let's put it that way. It came close to not being successful, but because our native people have always been neglected and put on a back burner in the issue, um, and so finally the younger Iroquois people uh, got sick of it, because we used to hear them say that there's agreements and there's supposed to be peace, and there never was. So finally, the younger people said, "Well, it's never going to be. They're never going to give us our land back um, unless we do something about it ourselves. We can't wait on them. They're the ones who took everything, and they're the ones that don't tell the truth. So why do we wait for them to do justice? We might as well stand up. So they did. They stood up, and they were ready to give their lives for that stand. And it almost ended up like a war. It came so close. It was dangerous, dangerous times. But because of our leadership that we had, they were able to avert that war or that bloodshed. Um, and then Como, the old man Como, finally understood that these Iroquois people are serious and they're willing to die for the land they're fighting for. And so he kind of backed off because he didn't want a big bloodbath, I guess. And then that means politically he would have to answer how come he allowed it as the governor of the state of New York. And the same thing with our own leaders of the Iroquois. We try to also contain our young a lot so that bloodshed would not occur. So between the two leaderships of the governor and our own, they were able to avert the war or bloodshed. So both parties did pretty good in that instance. And so Ganienkeh is still there, and in next to Plattsburgh. And I don't know the acreage they have now, but they're very successful. They're doing farming. They're doing lumber making. They got golf course, and they got their own medicine treatment center and everything. They're pretty self sufficient, and so on. So they're pretty successful as far as I can see, and they're pretty brave too.
And then Jeannie, could we have your sort of opinion on that question as well? What do you think made this a successful protest movement from your experience?
Well, I think what made it successful was the perseverance of the people, because they had always been taught this, and it was true that this is our homeland and we belong here, and whatever we do, we go to live in peace and live with the earth. And also we have a very strong spiritual beliefs, and those spiritual beliefs and ceremonies is what supports us, that we have persevered over generations and generations of injustice and wrongdoings, and still we carry on because we believe our teachings of peace and equality towards each other and take care of the earth. So those very strong beliefs are what gave those people the backbone and the will to stand up for what they always knew was right, what they had always been hearing about from the older people, that this is our home, this is our land, we belong here. That's why I don't agree with the phrase land back, because we always considered it was ours anyways, even if we were not right on it right there, it still is part of our original homeland, and we are part of it. We're part of that soil, the Mother Earth, and we give thanks for it and takes care of it, and give thanks for the water and protect everything on the earth. We put all of our lives into that and taking care of each other. So that strong spiritual background, I believe, is what supported all the other work that was going on to correct injustice. And to this day, it continues.
Also in the Adirondacks, I had an uncle and an aunt that lived up there, and they ran a museum up there called the Six Nation Museum. His name was Ray Fadden. He was married to my aunt, and Ray Fadden was school taught science in school, regular schools, public schools, and way he died. I think he was almost 100 years old. I think when he died, not too long ago, actually. And he used to teach the Mohawks and Tuscaroras and different ones, different reservations, how to be proud that we're Native people and why we should be proud and never ashamed. So he sort of was a man who reminded us of who we are, because one must remember that our grandparents, many of them went to Carlisle school and residential schools, and there they were forbidden their language and their cultural beliefs or spiritual beliefs. And so when they returned home, many of them couldn't speak their language, and many of them became Catholics or Methodists or Pentecost or something like that. So they didn't want to know anything about their own spiritual beliefs, because the schools and the missionaries taught them it was no good. So this Ray Fadden, he came around and he told us, no, the Creator gave us those ceremonies. The Creator gave us our language. And the Creator gave us how we are supposed to relate to the Mother Earth. And all those things is given to us by the Creator. So don't be ashamed and don't down your own spirituality. And so a lot of the people began to search and bring back the different ceremonies and bring back the history and bring back the knowledge of clans and everything. And so he went against what was school standards. He broke the rules because he was told not to talk about that, but he would. He was a great science teacher, and he would tell us that if we studied our science and finished our assignments, that we would get a reward every day. He would tell us stories about the ancient times and what it means, and he'd tell us stories about ghosts, and we loved ghost stories or scary stories, and he would reward us with that. And in the process, he told us all about what our clans is for, why we have clans. He told us about the history and what happened. He told us about the contributions that our native people made, both South America and North America, and he made us all feel proud and never ashamed who we were. And and he lived in the Adirondacks. That was his base. That's where his family came from. And so he married my aunt, and my aunt, she passed away too. She was I think 103 or 104 when she passed away. She belonged to the Turtle Clan. So he was hooked with the Adirondacks. So great teacher amongst all the most of the Iroquois. I think he used to teach in Tuscarora too one time. Yeah, that was Ray Fadden, and he was one who always went hunting for scraps in all the butcher shops in Saranac Lake and Lake Placid, and he'd bring all the scraps and the fat from the butchering, and then he would go in the back of his house and he would feed all the bears. Sometimes there'd be 8, 10 bears over there feasting on all the suet that he would bring back from the butcher shops. And he would talk to those bears, and they were friends with him. So he was really a nature man. And he was close to 100 when he finally passed away. And it was a great big hole left for us, because he taught my mother's age and my age, and he taught many generations. Yeah.
Before we, thank you so much, Tom and Jeannie. Before we turn it over to audience Q&A, I wonder if just quickly, Tom and Jeannie, you could kind of sum up, why is it important to continue to tell this story of this particular event in Adirondack history? Why is it important to keep this history alive and communicate about this moment where Mohawk people stood up for what they believed to be their right, their Aboriginal right to Adirondack land? Why do you think it's important to keep telling this story?
I think
Well,
it's important. Oh, is he talking?
go ahead, Jeannie. Go ahead. All I was going to say, Jeannie, is because it's the truth.
Yeah, it is. It's the truth, because it's always always been passed down to us. Since we were children, we heard our people talking about this and telling about us, how important it is for us, how important it is for identity, personal identity, spiritual identity, and where we come from and where we belong. And these places in the Adirondacks, they always had names for them. They had names for different areas, things that might have happened there, or places they went for special foods, or places they went, maybe made a camp or something. These were names of places that were very special to them. It's very important for us to tell the young people the future, to not forget about this. That's part of our history, our heritage, to learn how to love this earth and care for it. And we always consider it. It's still part of homeland. When you go anywhere, you have to stop and think, you're in somebody's homeland, regardless if they're not right standing in front of you right there that minute. You are still in somebody's homeland that is instilled in someone's heart throughout generations and generations. And we give thanks for that. Even though we're not standing right on that spot, it's still very important to us. And we give thanks for it. We appreciate it.
A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to go speak at Wilmington, New York. That's in the Adirondacks, in the heart of the Adirondacks, next to Lake Placid, or Whiteface Mountain. A small little community, all non-native people. And so I was invited to go speak over there. And so I went. So my wife went with me, and Kahnawake went with me, and my kids from Akwesasne came to meet us down there with their babies. And we did. We're supposed to do 1 hour presentation. It went for probably over 2 hours, maybe almost 3 hours. And I explained the history and our presence in the Adirondacks and the Mohawk Valley and all that, and what our ceremonies is for, and also what George Washington did to us, and Clinton and Sullivan's raid what did to us, and but I did it in the truthful manner, the way it was told, the way it happened. I didn't sugarcoat it or anything, but I wasn't mad either. I wasn't screaming either and angry. And we received a standing ovation. And I got a letter from them and said, of all the speakers that have ever been there, invited by the Historical Society, that this was the most interesting one. And they said, how come we didn't do this before? And they were so happy to hear that. And so that's another reason why it can make the non-native and the Indian be friends and have a brotherhood as it was intended at the beginning before treaties were broken. If people knows the truth, then friendship and peace can occur. But if it's not told the truth, then you don't have a friend, you don't have trust, and then there's problems. So as long as we keep telling the truth, then the possibilities of peace and friendship will be greater and greater each time.
Right.
And that's why.
The-
Anyways, I'm on the road. I just stopped at this restaurant with all my friends in St. Catherine, and we was barely able to get you on this computer. But my grandson here, he's a genius on this, so he pushed the buttons and Tinkerbell made your pictures appear.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. We were happy to have you with us, and thank you for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you too.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna go now then. Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye,
All
Tom.
right.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you. Okay.
So, Jeannie, we have some questions from the audience for you. One person who has a memory of the Moss Lake occupation. We have one attendee who says, "Thank you so much for this very important and informative discussion. We have memories as children of crossing police lines to visit the peoples occupying Moss Lake in 1975. we remember buying jewelry there. Are we remembering that correctly? Was that a way for the people to support themselves during the occupation, or was it a way to educate people about the occupation?
I would say it was both, because there was very much interchange between the natives of the Moss Lake encampment and people in the surrounding area. And there were people that did sell some of their handicrafts, for a little bit, but also during that time, it was a two-way exchange. It was also informational exchange. And what was far greater and more important was the friendships that were formed, friendships. People got to know each other as real people.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
So
that-
many really great questions here. A great question from the Talking Wing, the storytelling group. Two questions. What is the main focus of the Haudenosaunee Environmental Task Force now? And how can settler communities stand in solidarity with them and other territory return efforts?
The main reason for the Haudenosaunee Environmental Task Force is representatives from from different communities, from our different nation members to support each other and know about environmental issues we have to discuss in each area, and to help gain support for each other. And it's along the same line, talking to local people and helping people to understand what's happened and how can we work together to protect us, because many of these environmental situations are not just on our land, they're widespread, and many people are living with these problems and don't know what to do. So we've learned to go out and talk and learn together and become friends and work together to handle some of these situations. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, sure. That's a great explanation. It's kind of like our Confederacy's EPA in a way, because it was really created by the Grand Council of the Confederacy. And just in terms of solidarity, I mean, Jeanne works with individual landowners still today. She works with governments, as we saw with the Tully. In terms of standing in solidarity, I mean, I think there's a lot of work that settlers have to do themselves, and not always necessarily relying on Indigenous peoples to go out walking hand in hand with them, right? A lot of this is an internal work that has to happen.
Great, thank you for that. And apologies everyone for some of the noise interference we had with Tom. As he mentioned, he was on the road, and this was the place he was able to stop and get a signal to join us. And we were so grateful he was able to do so. But just apologies for any noise interference that came along with that. Another great question from an audience member. Do you see any more potential for land return for Mohawk people in the near future, like within perhaps the next 25 years or so?
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so, because there are many people constantly every day that are working on issues to regain some of the territory that is part of their original territory. It's a constant movement that's always been happening. And of course, sometimes it's very rare when there are results, but we have to continue it. And like I said, we have to continue working on understanding and righting injustices that have happened and misunderstanding, so that we can have the same goal once we understand each other.
Would you like to address that as well, Neil? What potential do you see for further land return in the perhaps not so distant future?
It's interesting that, I mean, I don't think there was not a lot of progress let's say 30, 40, 50 years ago with people willingly returning land. And so there's a lot of talk about it today. There's a lot of institutions and governments and individuals who say they want to do it. But as Jeannie says, the results are still kind of rare. So it's very interesting. You know, I think sometimes it's a very trendy thing to say you're going to give your land back. But when it comes down to it, not many people are actually engaging in that action from what I'm seeing.
And maybe we could just end on a more positive note. And Jeannie, could you just tell us a little bit more briefly about the recent land return to Onondaga people?
Oh, yes, yes. That's a great development that's happening. It's taken many, many people to work on it for a long, long time. And having suffered a lot of injustice and unfairness and unwilling to sit at the table and treat each other equally. Our people have been through quite a lot, and it's been many, many years. And finally, we came to a point where we did find somebody that came into office that almost immediately understood us, understood what we were talking about, and willing to talk to us and sit at the table and hear us, hear our voice and our words, and help to make this come about. Because, you know, this land return was not going to be a gift to us. It's a court order. It's a court order. So we were just trying to work it out. And now people have come forth that live on the around the territory, and people that have lived there for generations, and they've been friendly and sharing their knowledge of the areas and sharing some of the same concerns that we have with stewardship of the property and how we are, what we expect to do with it. It's taken a long, long time. It's not completely done, but it's in place enough for us to have celebration and let people know that there are people there that are doing evaluations, plant inventories and territories, such as looking at forest and swamp and just looking it over so we know what we're doing. And we also need people to know that we have no plans for immediate destruction of it, like we're not going to be doing any development there. And we're overjoyed and so happy that there is pure clean water flowing on this land, where there's an area just miles north of there that we have been dealing with for many, many years, is these mud boils that are just a short ways, and there are putting so many tons of soil into the water, and it's practically destroyed a waterway at this point. So we're really extremely happy to get this clean piece of property with clean water. There are fish not floating, fish swimming, I should say. You don't want to see a floating fish, right? But it's taken a lot of work. It's not only a few people, it's been many, many people for many, many years. And once again, it's come to the point of understanding, making friendships and being peaceful about it. Of course, there are some people that are going to be disagreeable and don't want us to have this, but in the long run, when they see the goods that will come out of it, hopefully it will calm their fears that they don't know what we're going to do, I guess. Yeah, it's been very nice to put the word out to the public that we're having some land return. I said return because I don't say land back, because I thought about it, because we never thought that it wasn't ours. It's always been ours. It's within our Aboriginal territory. We just didn't have complete possession of it for a while after some illegal happenings it's always been, we still appreciate it and know about its beauty and the benefits that we'll have.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. Thank you, Neil, and thanks to Tom Porter for joining us this evening. And I think we can all agree just an incredibly important story that needs to be told and retold, and the connections to present day efforts to return land are very important. And congratulations, and we're all very happy to hear about this recent story of land coming back to the Onondaga Nation. So thank you so much to you both. I just want to mention that 2 weeks from this evening, we'll have another program on August 23rd at 7 p.m. and it's titled Towards a More Inclusive Adirondack Wilderness. And we hope you will join us for that program. So thank you so much to everyone for being with us here this evening. We hope you have a wonderful evening, and we hope to see you again very soon. Take care. Bye now.
Good night.
Right.